Hey everyone! It is finally time to do the finale of our 14er project, so I'm all decked out in my Colorado gear, and he's wearing blue, so that's good.
I don't have any Colorado clothes.
After 13 days of seeing some of the best that Colorado had to offer, it was finally our 14th day, and it would not be an easy one.
Once again, our day would start well before the sun came up so that we can get up our last two 14ers and still have time to do everything else we had to do for the day.
This is our last early morning wake up to do our last big hike, and I am ready to be done already.
I think we're just getting started. Nice little hike this morning up Shavano and Tabeguache, the last two 14ers.
Last ones.
Yeah, Shavano and Tabeguache.
Let's do this.
Yeah, should be a fun day. Like we've said before, hiking in the dark is always an enjoyable way to start the day. Just focus on your little beam of light in front of you.
Occasionally, through breaks in the trees, we'd catch glimpses of the crescent moon above.
With the light from the sun, we could see that the trail was winding through some beautiful patches of wildflowers.
It was definitely one of the best sunrises of the project.
When we finally reached treeline, I could tell it was going to be another chilly and windy day. We are above treeline, and it's time for our first wardrobe change of the day. Starting to get into some chilly wind. I imagine today we'll end up having more wardrobe changes than a Beyonce concert, but I guess we'll see.
The pleasant nature of the hike up to this point was replaced by a cold chill in my body and just struggling to hike in the wind. There were points where I actually felt like the wind was going to blow me over if I didn't stabilize myself.
Hey, we're almost at the top of Shavano.
But finally, we reached the summit of our 13th 14er, Mount Shavano. And luckily, we were able to find a spot to hunker down that was both in the sun and out of the wind.
Alright, we are on the summit of Shavano, our 13th 14er, so we're almost done. Kind of a fun climb up the mountain this morning, a little bit of wind, made it enjoyable. Now we're sitting here out of the wind in the sun, and it's nice and toasty.
Yeah, so when KENDRICK says a little bit of wind, he means like a ridiculous amount of wind. I will just say I'm thankful I had my trekking poles because I almost blew over like 20 times. I am grateful to be out of the wind now.
And just like that, the last 14er of our project was only 1 mile away. But that mile included a 600-foot descent, a 500-foot ascent, and was all along a rocky ridge getting hit by the winds. Eventually, we reached the summit of the 14th and final 14er of our project, Tabeguache Peak.
I have to say, I was pretty exhausted at this point. Hiking in the wind just kind of relentlessly beat me down. But at the same time, I was crazy excited.
Again, we found a good place to hunker down and enjoy some time on our last summit.
We made it! That is 14 peaks in 14 days, and I will say, this is the one part of our project that I honestly didn't know or think that I could necessarily do. Everything else is just fun, showing off Colorado, but this was a personal challenge for me. And I have KENDRICK to thank for getting me to the top of all these peaks, because I can certainly say I never would have done it if he hadn't pushed me and encouraged me every step of the way. So it feels really great to be sitting up here right now.
I gotta admit, I'm pretty happy that Mandy decided on this big project. I know there's a lot of uncertainty going into it just because, I don't know, they're big mountains, but she was really tough and stuck it out throughout the whole project, and here we are on peak number 14, Tabeguache. But you can't linger on the summit forever, especially when you have more coffee shops, breweries, and distilleries to visit. So eventually, we had to head back down. To get back down, we first had to make our way back up and over the summit of Shavano.
We finally got back down to tree line and I was so grateful to be out of the wind. Plus, we got to see all the amazing wildflowers that we had walked by in the morning, and so of course we had to feature a few of them. So first up is wildflower number 12. So I'm really excited to feature this next wildflower. Most of the flowers we've featured so far have been really common, but this is the first time I've seen this little flower, which is called a blue gentian. The blue gentian grows in montane subalpine climates in the western United States. And according to my flower app, it stands for love and power. Really can't beat that.
And not too far from the blue gentian was our 13th featured wildflower. It's really easy to get caught up looking at the big pretty flowers, but don't forget to appreciate small ones too. This is bitter cress, also known as milkmaid. It can be identified by its 4 leaves. In the evening hours before the sun goes down, it will close its leaves, and before rain, it will droop its head down to avoid rain getting on the pollen. Just a pretty flower, and they kind of grow in little patches like this that are pretty picturesque.
And we saved the best for last. You know we couldn't leave it out. Colorado state flower, number 14, the Columbine.
Definitely the best one. You can't talk about Colorado wildflowers without images of this iconic flower being the first thing that come to mind. These flowers are found throughout the higher elevations of the state.
There are about 70 species of columbines, with about a third of those native to North America. Colorado's state flower is the beautiful white and lavender Rocky Mountain columbine.
For our 14th scenic drive, we chose the 55-mile stretch of highways 24 and 285 that goes from Leadville down to Poncha Springs, Colorado. We split the drive into 2 days, days 13 and 14, as we made our way south. This gorgeous drive takes you along 14 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks, including the highest point in the state, Mount Elbert. It's one of my favorite stretches of road in the entire state. By this point, it had already been a long day, but it was time to head to the nearby town of Salida to finish off the remaining items in our project.
First, we were obviously in need of some coffee. All those 4 a.m. wake-up calls were definitely taking their toll. So we headed to our 13th coffee shop, Sacred Grounds Coffee. This charming little coffee shop focuses on one thing: great coffee. Since their entire building burned down back in 2005, owner Brian Jocelyn didn't waste any time rebuilding and realizing his dream of roasting his own coffee. And our quad Americanos were just what we needed for a pick-me-up. Just finished a big hike. I got my iced Americano to cool me down.
And I got my hot coffee because, remember, I don't believe in cold coffee. And just in case those Americanos weren't enough, we headed straight to our 14th and final featured coffee shop, Brown Dog Coffee Company. Brown Dog has been serving the area with its locations in Salida and Buena Vista since about 1995, and both locations make for a perfect stop after a big day in the mountains. It was a warm day, so we decided to enjoy a little ice cream with our coffee.
All caffeinated up, it was time to head to our 14th water feature. And as we were walking there, we were recognized by a YouTube fan, Nancy and her son.
I guess that makes us famous.
Totally famous. So we decided to get their take on what life is like living in Salida.
I think the culture here is really cool in the community. I mean, the fact that Distillery in town is owned by the mayor. There's a lot of good people, great people here, and
we bought land here in '95, and how much this town has changed.
no, I mean you can raft, you can get right on the river, right from town, skiing, 20 minutes away.
Yeah,
And
mountain
you have
biking.
music every Thursday night during the summer. All together, just a good community.
After parting ways, we finally did make it to our 14th and final water feature, the Arkansas River.
So one prominent feature that stands out as you drive down the Saltwatch corridor is the Arkansas River. I've always loved doing this drive because you just see so many great views of it. You see people rafting, people fly fishing, and just swimming around and having a good time. It's just a really great feature, and you see it in Buena Vista, and you see it here in Salida too. By now, you should know enough about us that you probably guessed that we would end this project with a few celebratory drinks at our last brewery and distillery. So, we headed to the 14th and final brewery of our project and one of my personal favorites, Elevation Brewing Company.
There's no better place than their tap room to get an idea of all they have to offer and sample some of the beers that don't quite make it into the stores.
Nowadays, it's hard for a brewery to stand out in Colorado since there's just so many of them. Yet Elevation has always managed to be one of my favorites in the state.
I really enjoyed their barrel-aged stouts and porters.
And I always enjoy their IPAs.
And with that, we had just one more distillery to complete not just the distilleries, but the whole project. So we headed to our 14th distillery, Woods High Mountain Distillery. When we arrived, the bar was full, so we sat on a couch, walked up to the bar to order our drinks, and were a little bummed at the anticlimactic finish to our project. At least we were amused by the creative cocktail names. Of course, we still chose a tasting flight over a cocktail.
But then a few spots at the bar opened up, and we migrated.
We arrived knowing that the owner and distiller was also the mayor of the town, and we had really hoped to chat him up, but really had no idea if he would be there. After overhearing the conversation beside us for a few minutes, Kendrick finally leaned over to me and said, "I think that's the owner."
Not just a hat rack. Sure enough, it was the owner, distiller, mayor, whatever you want to call him.
Once we started chatting with him, we could immediately sense the passion and excitement he had for the work he does. And luckily, he invited us to the back for a private tour and some samplings straight from the barrels.
It's always great to see someone who's found the things in life they're passionate about because it shows through the way they talk and the things they do. This guy obviously loves what he does.
Fort Lewis was the only college that would take me, and I went there, and one of the first things I saw was this beetle with a kayak driving down the street, and I was like, man, that's something I kind of want to do. Started kayak, wound up moving to Salida in the late 80s to be a river guide. Went down the river with Peter Simonson. He had brought maybe 20 different whiskeys on that trip, and we drank a ton of different whiskeys, and by the end of that trip I was like, God, I'm gonna make whiskey. Yeah, 13 years maybe that I had been telling that story. My friends were over it, and finally I had to shit or get off the pot. It was time to either fulfill that story or stop telling the story. Been making booze ever since. I don't know. Yeah, P.T. Wood. I am Mayor Salida. Weird, right? So that's an interesting thing. I was not entirely pleased with the direction of our local government. Being one of the biggest complainers, I thought that maybe I should be part of the solution. And our city government is functioning better than maybe it has ever functioned, and it is just a good time. We've done just this amazing stuff that moves our community forward that I'm super proud of. Well, of course, whiskey makes Salida a better town. When we have council meetings and things don't go the way exactly I want, it's good to have 4,000 gallons of whiskey in the back room.
When we started this project, we couldn't predict how it would end, but I don't think we could have scripted a better ending than our experience at Woods High Mountain Distillery, our 98th Colorado feature. Well, if you know me, then you know there's a fun little game I like to play whenever we do a workshop or a gathering or pretty much anytime we get together with people. I like to ask everyone to come up with their highlight, lowlight, and grateful. And of course, I always make Kendrick go first.
I should have known that was coming. Alrighty. My highlight was visiting all of the new places I'd never been before. I first moved to Colorado in fall of 2011, and I feel like I still have a lifetime's worth of things to see and do here. My lowlight was when the project ended. I'd love to just spend the rest of my life playing tourist here in the state. And I'm grateful that Mandy would even trust me to plan something like this and agree to join me. You'd think she would have learned her lesson after our 13-day backpacking trip in the Grand Canyon.
You'd think. My highlight was the moment we hit the summit of our 14th 14er. Even though every single summit was definitely a victory for me, hitting that 14th one and being able to check it off my list just made me feel complete. My low light was the utter exhaustion. Not only did we have a bunch of early mornings, but even on our days off, we were traveling and trying to check things off on our list, and it was exhausting. And my grateful is that once again, KENDRICK has showed me I can do something I didn't think I could do. When he first suggested this project, I thought, have fun without me, but he drugged me along and now I can say I did it.
I'll admit, this project first started as hiking 14 14ers in 14 days, but somehow snowballed into a bigger logistical ordeal, because why not? In the end, I think we both surprised ourselves a little bit. So, after 14 days, our project totals are 14 of everything! Yay!
Yay! Last but not least, we want to thank each and every one of you who watched this series to the end, even though it took way longer than we expected. If you're interested in what we did during this 2-week project, keep following us because we will be putting out a free downloadable guide to our adventure. You know, sometime.
When we get to it.
So, here's to a lifetime of exploring colorful Colorado. Love and light. 9 months later. Woo!
9 months later, 14er project complete.
Woo!